The Papaya rules have been a major talking point all season long. On the surface, they are a very simple set of racing guidelines that try to give the drivers a fair playing field to fight for the title, whilst also stating that the number one rule is that you cannot crash into your teammates. And now, again, on the surface, these principles are just common sense, but I think it's fair to say that the way these rules have been applied and some of the situations that McLaren themselves have created has not only got them tied up in knots, but has also now fans questioning as to whether or not these rules really give us the fair racing that McLaren think that they do. In terms of the Singapore incident, Lando essentially was focusing so much on Oscar and trying to take advantage of the gap on the inside that was made by Max that he essentially misjudged his braking and crashed into the back of Max. And now that in itself was not too costly for either of the drivers, but the consequence was that he also then crashed into the side of Piastri. Going into the corner, Oscar was marginally ahead at the apex, and it was only Lando crashing into the side of him that then caused him to lose momentum as he had to catch his car, that ultimately allowed Lando to get a better exit and overtake him. In the end, the stewards, who always are more lenient on lap 1, decided that it was simply a racing incident, even though it kind of looked like Lando did a bump to pass. What was perhaps even more interesting was Oscar's reaction, in which he once again called to question how fair his teammate was being. The reason why this is significant is because McLaren has been preaching about fairness all season when it comes to racing between their two drivers, but if you look at the two times in which Oscar this season was fighting hard wheel to wheel to overtake Lando in Austria and Hungary, on both occasions Oscar, who was very aggressive and even locked up multiple times, never once actually crashed into Lando. This is now the second time that Lando has crashed into Oscar, and whilst it didn't affect Oscar in Canada, in Singapore it almost certainly cost him that position, and Oscar's frustration was very visible to see. Whilst there has been minor moments throughout the season where the team has felt the need to intervene, like in Australia for example, where McLaren told Piastri to not attack Lando, given the circumstances, those moments felt justifiable. However, very quickly the team started to meddle in things that I think should be left alone. In Monza qualifying, after Lando made a mistake in Q2 and was under pressure, Oscar was asked to give him a tow to help him get into Q3. And now if McLaren were not in a title fight, then I would totally understand it. But because they are, their dynamic has to be treated differently. Even if he is your teammate, to be asked to give your title rival a tow regardless of how inconsequential it was, after he was the one who made a mistake, I don't think Oscar should have been put into that position, and I absolutely would not have blamed him if he chose to ignore it and let Lando sort out his own consequences. And now those to me were minor incidents, but what then happened in the race in Monza definitely crossed the line. And now a lot of comparisons were made to Hungary 24, but to me there was a very key difference that resulted in a similar outcome. In Hungary, it was the team's decision to pit Lando first, and then the team's decision to keep Oscar out for an extra few laps instead of bringing him in the lap after, which then resulted in Lando undercutting Oscar. In Monza, however, McLaren did everything right by asking Lando if they could pit Oscar first to cover Leclerc, because he wasn't even close to undercutting Lando under normal racing circumstances. However, it was then purely bad luck and not a team decision that caused a slow pit stop that then allowed Oscar to undercut Lando. It was obviously really bad luck for Lando to get the slow pit stop, and the irony is that this happened right after Zandvoort, in which he had to retire with a reliability related issue. But at the end of the day, that is how racing goes sometimes. I get McLaren feeling guilty for giving Lando a slow pit stop, which cost him that position, but as Oscar then instinctively said over the radio, based on what they had agreed to beforehand, slow pit stops are just a part of racing. I said at the time that Monza to me started to feel less like a team wanting to give their drivers an even playing field and more like borderline race manipulation. It also set a very dangerous precedent because bad luck is part of sport, and when you try to compensate for it too much, you set unrealistic expectations for your drivers, which I don't think the team will be able to live up to. To say that these rules have started to cause a civil war online between the fan bases of these two drivers would be an understatement. Ever since the beginning of the season, and even going back to last year, there has been accusations of favoritism from both sides. And now, whilst I'm not going to psychoanalyze whether Stella and Brown actually do have a bias, what I will say is that the frustration and tension that is starting to build specifically around Piastri is that in situations where the team has chosen to intervene or chosen not to intervene, so far it has felt like the majority of them have come at his expense and have cost him points compared to Lando. The dichotomy of these Papaya rules is that, in a way, so far from the team's perspective, they have been a success. McLaren are having one of the all-time most successful seasons in F1 history. They have wrapped up the Constructors' title with 6 races still to go, which is a joint record that they now hold with Red Bull from 2023. And if we're being honest, had they not had the stinker of a weekend they did in Baku, they really should have wrapped it up in a record 7. It seems like for now the drivers have continued to buy into this philosophy because they don't want to divide the team from within like Lewis and Nico did, and they also want to maintain their partnership and maintain their chances of fighting for the title at McLaren for years to come. Having said that, there is absolutely no doubt that we are already seeing cracks beginning to form. Oscar admitted that after Monza, the team had to clarify their rules, and that behind the scenes his manager Mark Webber wasn't happy about McLaren's decision to swap them back. On top of that, as we have seen multiple times, even the drivers now are not sure anymore as to exactly what is fair and where the line is for them to ask to interfere. In Silverstone and Singapore, Oscar felt the need to ask if Lando could give him the positions back, and it feels like now we're having to wait for the FIA to make their decisions, and then for McLaren to confirm between their drivers if it falls within their own racing guidelines. It seems utterly bizarre, overly complicated, and I am now certain that this is simply unsustainable. Although there still seems to be buy-in from both of the drivers because they want to look united, and with their McLaren corporate training, there is no way that they're going to speak out against the team in public. Oscar in particular, after every single race and after every single incident, has started to look more and more perplexed, confused, and downright annoyed. McLaren has done a great job at brainwashing, let's say, their two drivers into always doing what is best for the interest of the team, but so far it's felt like they have put a papaya-coloured leash onto wild animals, and I can't help but feel that with the Constructors' title now secured, is it time to just let things go and let nature take its course between Oscar and Lando? In trying to give their drivers an equal playing field and in trying to always do what is optimum for the team, the amount that McLaren has interfered with normal racing situations has become abnormal to the point where even their own drivers don't understand what is now allowed in the eyes of the FIA compared to the eyes of McLaren. The problem with interfering as much as they have is that by setting so many precedents, in the future when a similar incident that isn't quite identical will arise again, one of the drivers is going to feel almost entitled to expect a similar outcome to what happened before that is more beneficial to them, and if the team in that moment don't agree and choose not to act upon it, that is going to break the trust that they currently have, and it will only cause things to spiral from there. To me, the outcome of this championship is more than just about who is going to bag their first title. I see it as a wider battle for who is going to have control of the team going forward. If Oscar, who let's not forget is only in his 3rd season of F1, is able to supersede Lando and become champion, I think that it will empower him even more in the future to ignore the calls that he feels are unjust, because at that point, he will be the number 1 driver at McLaren as the champion. That is the reality and the history of Formula 1 when teams have had 2 number 1 drivers. It is almost a fact that 2 number 1 drivers cannot coexist within a consistently championship challenging team for an extended period of time. And with these Papaya rules already starting to break the trust between team and driver, it feels like not only are they causing more problems than they should, but McLaren is also struggling to prevent what, in my opinion, is almost inevitable, with one of them being pushed out within the next couple of years. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.